As we move through this Holy Week, we come now to the edge of what is often called the Great 3 Days, the last day of Jesus' life on this earth, and the anticipation of his resurrection on Easter Sunday. These days, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, Holy Saturday, are filled with the drama of this season and indeed the central drama of our faith. On Thursday, we see Jesus with his disciples. They've gathered together to celebrate the Passover meal, the feast for which many have come to Jerusalem, a time to remember God's great and merciful and powerful action in liberating Israel from slavery and oppression in Egypt, and the beginning of God's people coming into their own identity through their years in the wilderness before settling in their new home. At table with them, Jesus uses the elements that are at the heart of any meal and a Seder meal, bread and wine. In his hands, they become a particular way to not only remember him, but for us to become incorporated into him. Also at this feast, at this table, at this last meal, Jesus says, I give you a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends, if you do what I command you. This is my commandment, that you love one another. Jesus is going away. He's coming to the end of this earthly life that he shares with people that have become close to him over the period of several years. These are his final instructions. Love one another. He anticipates that they will become a community, and in community, life is hard. It's not easy to sustain relationships with others. It's not easy to work together and keep going in the same direction. It's not easy when you live in tight spaces and people get on your nerves. When you're out of routines and rhythms, love one another, he says to them and to us. This year we struggle with how to love others that we can't be close to, physically speaking. How do we love at a distance? We will not always be at this distance, thankfully. We will return. Hopefully we will return with a deepened sense of how precious it is that we are community together, a community where we learn how to love one another. On Friday, on Good Friday, we see the very human reality of the suffering and death of Jesus. It is a story told usually with great deliberation, slowly, so that it sets itself inside of us, so that we hear once again every year this story of Jesus' pain, his willingness to go to death, his love for us made visible. What does this story tell us? It tells us so much that preachers and faithful people and theologians and artists have reflected on it for 2,000 years. We will never exhaust its meaning. But among other things, it clearly means that Jesus has been there too. He has been in the valley of the shadow of death. And as we walk through our own valleys, whether that is the valley of death or the valley of loneliness or the valley of isolation or the valley of fear, we know that he has gone there ahead of us and that he walks beside us, not just in the days of sunshine, but in these days. Saturday is perhaps the most challenging of these days. It is the day during the day when Jesus is in the tomb. He really is not here. He is with the dead. He is himself dead. The world gets very quiet on Holy Saturday. If you move through these great 3 days, if you move through Maundy, Thursday, and then the reading of the Passion on Friday, there is a palpable sense for many that on Saturday there is a great emptiness. The earth stands still. Maybe that's a metaphor for where we are this year. We are in Holy Saturday, except it's not one day, it's a period of time, an in-between time. But that's the most important thing to remember, is that it is in between. On the other side of Holy Saturday is the incredible miracle of Easter. For many churches, and for us here at Highland for many years, we have celebrated an Easter vigil, which traditionally begins late in the day or at or near sunset on Saturday, that anticipates Easter Sunday. When we light a new fire, we light a new Paschal candle, we tell the whole story of redemption, and we welcome in the reality, the gift, the power of Easter. Of course, we do that again on Sunday morning. Easter is often called the 8th day of creation because it is outside of the first week, the 7 days after God rested. Then the 8th day, there is a new creation. That's what resurrection is. It's not just the return of spring, it's something radically new. This year, our gospel reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew. Each one of the gospel stories of resurrection is similar and different. This one ends in a distinctive way. Rather than staying in Jerusalem, Jesus and the angels both say to the women to tell the disciples to go back to Galilee, go back where you came from, go back to where this all started. Go back, there I will appear to you. And in Matthew, when Jesus appears to the company of the disciples some days, weeks later, he says, go. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. So the end of this story is a commission to us. We are now to go and be Christ for the world, be his body, be his voice, be his hands, his heart. Over these next 3 days, may you find yourself anew in this story. Know the presence of Christ walking with you in days of darkness, and isolation, and prepare to hear with great joy the promise, "Lo, I am with you always, to the close of the age." Amen.